There's always a picture of Bert on the night table. In a mahogany frame, he's smiling as if he's just told a good joke. I remember that spring we went to Monterey, and Bert insisted we rent a boat. Merle, you need to relax for once in your life, he said then. And I did relax. He took this picture that day. Me laughing with my head tilted back and the wind fluttering my hair. That picture is now stored in a box with other memories. I left only his portrait in plain sight. 4 years have passed since I was widowed. The doctors said something about an aneurysm, sudden and unpredictable. Bert passed away in his sleep, unhurt. They told me it was a comfort. Is it any consolation that your husband went to bed and never woke up? That you woke up next to the body of a man you'd lived with for 41 years? After the funeral, Sybil suggested I move in with them. Mom, you can't be alone in your condition. But I refused. The house where Bert and I lived was full of ghosts, not just of him, but of our life together. Every corner screamed of what was no longer there. I sold the house a year after he died. When the insurance money came through, the decision matured on its own. I had never been to Calexico, only heard from a coworker at school that it was a quiet place right near the Mexican border, warm, quiet, and inexpensive. Just what an elderly widow who had taught physics to teenagers for 35 years and now wanted quiet. Sybil was furious when she learned of my decision to move 300 miles away from them. Mom, have you lost your mind? Calexico? It's a shithole on the border. There's crime, drugs, illegals. Honey, I said, you're confusing Calexico with the TV shows you watch at night. Who's going to take care of you if something happens? Her voice was ringing with tension. I wanted to say that no one had been very eager to take care of me in recent years, but I kept silent. Sybil had always been pragmatic, even as a child. Unlike Bert, who could spend hours talking about constellations, I was a strict mother. Maybe that's why there was always this invisible wall between us. I found the house on the internet. It was small, on a quiet street with orange trees. 2 stories with 3 bedrooms and a cozy veranda. Too big for one, but I loved the feeling of space after our cramped apartment in suburban San Diego. I'd bought it without even going to a viewing, just asked the agent to show the house via video link. Orson, Sybil's husband, showed interest in my business for the first time. Merle. He's the only one in the family who calls me by my first name instead of Mom or Grandma. Are you sure this is a wise investment? I can check the paperwork. After all, real estate is my specialty. Thanks, Orson, but I already signed the contract. He smiled, but his eyes remained cold. Well, if you have any problems, just ask. In all the 20 years Sybil has been married to Orson, he and I have never become close. He's the kind of man who always keeps his distance from his in-laws, especially his mother-in-law. Bert said Orson was just afraid of smart women. This guy graduated from college with a GPA and you taught physics. He feels his intellectual inferiority around you. My husband laughed. But I think it's about something else. Orson is the kind of predator who always calculates the benefits. And what's the benefit of an elderly physics teacher? Moving was both agonizing and liberating. I left most of my belongings behind, taking only the essentials and a few memorabilia. There was almost no furniture in the new house, but that didn't bother me. The empty rooms breathed possibility. Sybil called the day after I arrived. How are you, Mother? Have you changed your mind yet? I'm fine, I replied, staring at the bare walls of my new bedroom. The house is beautiful. The neighbors are friendly. I hadn't really met anyone yet, but Sybil didn't need to know that. Orson says you overpaid a lot. This neighborhood isn't worth that kind of money. Maybe, I agreed. But it's my home now. She sighed. Mom, we're worried about you. Dale is asking when he can come visit. Dale is my granddaughter, the only person in the family with whom I have a warm relationship. Despite her 19 years, she displays a wisdom that her parents lack. As a child, she often stayed with me on weekends, and we spent time over simple pleasures, baking cookies, playing board games, talking about books. Sybil thought I was too soft on my granddaughter, but I just let Dale be herself, without the constant pressure and expectations her mother placed on her. Of course, let her come, I replied. Just give me a couple weeks to get settled in. I spent the first month in Calexico in blissful solitude. Slowly, I furnished the house, choosing each item with a care I'd never allowed myself. Bert loved antiques, and our old house was full of heavy Victorian furniture. Now I chose light, simple lines more suited to the desert climate. In the bedroom, a light wood bed with a high headboard. In the living room, a comfortable ivory sofa and an armchair where I spent evenings with a book. Sybil and Orson arrived 6 weeks after I moved in, unannounced. I was just finishing planting succulents in the yard when their silver SUV pulled up in front of my house. Mine is surprise. Sybil jumped out of the car, beaming with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. We decided to check on you. Orson nodded, looking around the house with an appraiser's look. Not bad, Merle, he said. But the roof looks troubled. Did you have it inspected before you bought it? The inspector said it was fine, I replied, shaking the earth off my hands. Come in, I'll make tea. Orson spent the next 2 hours walking around the house, opening cupboards, checking taps, tapping on walls and making notes on his phone. Sybil sat with me in the kitchen, asking about the neighbors and complaining about her job at the construction company. Did you know this neighborhood is prone to flooding? Orson asked, returning from inspecting the basement. And the foundation looks questionable. I checked the flood history before I bought it, I replied. The last one was 30 years ago, and it didn't affect this street. He shook his head. Trust, but verify. I can recommend a good builder for you, a client of mine. He'll give you a discount. Thank you, but I don't need it yet. Before he left, Orson lingered in the yard, studying the exterior walls of the house. Merle, I'm seriously concerned about the state of this place. Why don't you let me handle the repairs? I know contractors who will do it quickly and inexpensively. Orson, I appreciate your concern, but the house is fine. He smiled the same cold smile he always does. Of course it is, but the offer still stands. After they left, I discovered that Orson had left business cards for 3 different remodeling companies on the kitchen table. Dale arrived a week after my parents. Unlike them, she'd sent a message ahead of time, asking if it would be convenient if she stayed the weekend. I met her at the bus station, tall with a mop of brown hair and freckles she'd inherited from her grandfather. Grandma, she hugged me so hard I almost fell over. You look amazing. You look great with a tan. At home, Dale wandered through the rooms, admiring every little detail. It's so you, she said, looking at my mineral collection on the living room shelf. Dad said the house was falling apart, but I can see he was exaggerating. Your father is worried. I tried to sound neutral. Dale rolled her eyes. Dad's not worried. He's controlling. He was furious when he found out you bought the house without consulting him. Why? She shrugged. Who knows? Probably resentful that you didn't use his professional services. You know how he likes to feel indispensable. That evening we sat on the veranda watching the sun go down. The sky over Calexico was colored in shades of orange and purple, one of those sunsets worth moving to the desert for. I'm glad you're here, Grandma, Dale said, sipping her lemonade. You're having a good time, I can tell. Better than I expected, I admitted. Sometimes I feel guilty about enjoying life without your grandfather, but then I remember that he always wanted me to be happy. Grandpa was a wise man. Yes, he was, I said quietly. How are your parents doing? Your mom doesn't talk much on the phone. Dale tensed up. It's the same as usual. Mom works late, Dad. Well, you know Dad, always looking for a big deal. Something in her tone made me wary. Is he in trouble? I'm not sure. She looked away. They argue a lot about money. Dad had invested in some project, and it didn't seem to be going according to plan. That explained Orson's sudden interest in my house, but not completely. In the morning, I woke up to the sound of a drill running. Looking out the window, I saw Orson measuring something on my porch. "What are you doing?" I asked, stepping out onto the doorstep in my robe. He didn't even look embarrassed. "Good morning, Merle. I thought I'd fix these loose railings. It's dangerous to leave them like this." "I didn't ask you to do that. How'd you even get in the yard?" "Dale let me in." He nodded toward the kitchen, where my granddaughter sat looking guilty. "Sybil and I were in the neighborhood, so I thought I'd stop by and see how you were doing." 7 o'clock on a Sunday morning? He shrugged. "I'm an early bird. By the way, I noticed the gutter system needs replacing, and the shingles on the south side of the roof look suspicious. All day, Orson helped with minor repairs that I didn't ask for. Sybil joined us later in the day, bringing lunch from a local restaurant. "Isn't this nice?" she said as she watched her husband paint the window frame. "Orson is so concerned about your comfort, Mom." I watched him with growing concern. His interest in my house seemed excessive, even for a man who makes a living in real estate. When they finally left, Dale apologized for letting Dad in. "He said he wanted to surprise you," she explained. "I didn't think he'd start remodeling your house." "It's okay, sweetie. Your dad's just, thoughtful." After Dale left, I started to notice a change in Orson's behavior. He called almost every day, asking about the condition of the house, offering to send his guys to check the wiring, the roof, the plumbing. 3 times he arrived unannounced, always with tools and always with new ideas for improving my home. On his last visit, when he insistently suggested replacing all the windows on the first floor, I couldn't stand it. "Orson, I appreciate your help, but this house belongs to me, and I'll decide what to do with it." He froze, then slowly lowered the tape measure he was using to measure the window opening. "Sure, Merle. I just want to make sure you're safe. I'm perfectly safe, and I prefer that you call before you visit." He nodded, but something in his gaze made me go cold. "Whatever you say. After all, this is your home. For now." "What do you mean by?" Orson smiled his trademark smile that didn't involve his eyes. "Just a disclaimer. Of course it's your home." I couldn't sleep for a long time that night, replaying his words in my head. "Bye." Something about that short word made me feel uncomfortable in my own home for the first time since moving in. The knock on the door came as I was arranging books on the new shelves. I wasn't expecting visitors. Sybil and Orson had promised to arrive in a week, and I didn't know anyone else in Calexico. A thin woman with short-cropped gray hair stood on the doorstep. She had a tanned, wrinkled face and bright blue eyes. She held a basket covered with a plaid towel. "I'm Faye Corbett, your neighbor 3 doors down," she introduced herself, holding out the basket. "Brought some homemade bread. Sorry I didn't stop by sooner. I was visiting my sister in Yuma. I invited her in, feeling oddly relieved that it wasn't Orson with another inspection Merle Havisham. I introduced myself, accepting the gift. "It's a pleasure to meet you." We settled on the veranda with tea and fresh bread. Faye turned out to be a retired school administrator who had lived in Calexico for the past 15 years. "After my husband died, I didn't see the point of staying in San Francisco," she said, spreading butter on a slice of bread. "It's too expensive and noisy. Here it's quiet, warm, and people stay out of your business. At least most of them." A spark flashed in her eyes, and I smiled involuntarily. There was something refreshing about Faye's directness. "I'm a widow, too," I shared. "I moved here 4 months ago." "I know," she nodded. News travels fast in small towns, especially if the news is a woman buying a house on her own without a man telling her what to do. I laughed. My brother in law tries to make up for it. Every time he comes over, he finds a dozen things that need fixing, replacing, or remodeling. Faye frowned. That narcissistic guy in the big silver SUV? Seen him around here a few times, even when you weren't home. I froze with the cup to my lips. What do you mean? Last Tuesday, Faye took a sip of tea. I was walking from the post office and I saw him go into your yard with some woman. They stayed inside for about an hour. I thought maybe you'd let them, but from the look on your face, no. A chill ran down my spine. I didn't give Orson a key to the house. How did he get in? And who was with him? Are you sure it was my brother-in-law? A tall man, always in a suit, with a look like he's assessing how much you're worth? Faye clarified. Yes, it was him, and the woman with him was a slender blonde, very much like you. Your daughter? Sybil? I nodded, feeling anxiety rising inside. You didn't see them go into the house? Faye shook her head. Dash. No, but they were definitely inside. I saw the light on in the living room. And the next day, I noticed them again. This time, there was an elderly man with them. They were walking around the house, and your son-in-law was showing me something, waving his arms. I set my cup aside, my hands shaking slightly. Orson and Sybil in my house without permission? With some strange man? This was out of line. I'm sorry if I upset you, Faye said, noticing my reaction. I just thought you should know. No, I appreciate the information. I tried to smile. I'm just surprised. I think we need to talk to my family about the boundaries. Faye nodded with an understanding look. Family is complicated. My son tried to sell my house behind my back 10 years ago. Thought elderly mother would be better off in a nursing home, and he would save the money from the sale for me, of course. What did you do? I asked, suddenly interested. I changed the locks, rewrote the will, and haven't spoken to him in 2 years. Faye shrugged. Now he lives in Oregon and calls at Christmas. Sometimes the best thing you can do for a family is to keep your distance. After Faye left, I walked around the house, scrutinizing every room. Nothing obvious caught my eye, but the feeling that someone had been here without my knowledge wouldn't let go. In the bedroom, the dresser drawer wasn't fully closed. In the bathroom, the towels weren't hanging the way I'd left them. Little things that could be written off as forgetfulness, but I knew I wasn't forgetting. In the cabinet that used to be the nursery, the folders of house paperwork lay in perfect order. Too perfect, not the way I'd stacked them. I opened the top one and looked through the contents. Everything was in place: the purchase agreement, the insurance, the tax receipts. But something told me they were being studied by someone else's eyes. That same evening, I called the security company. The manager promised to send a technician in 2 days. Then I dialed Sybil's number. Mom, how are you? My daughter's voice sounded carefree, as if she hadn't entered my house without permission. I'm fine. I tried to sound normal. I just wanted to ask, did you and Orson come by my house last week? Pause. Too long. No, why would you say that? Her voice got tense. We would have let you know if we were coming over. A neighbor saw you here, you and Orson and some man. Another pause. Oh, that's... Sybil stammered. We were driving by and decided to stop by, but you weren't home. We didn't go inside, just looked at the yard. Orson's client was with us, interested in properties in your neighborhood. Lies. An outright blatant lie. I felt a tearing inside. My own daughter was lying to my face. I see, I said in a neutral tone. By the way, I'll install the alarm system next week. It'll be safer that way. An alarm system? Sybil seemed surprised. Why? It's an extra expense, and I've already decided, I interrupted her. Just so you know. After the call, I sat in my chair for a long time, staring out of the window at the fading dusk. What were they looking for in my house? And who was the man with them? In the morning, I woke up with a firm intention to figure out what was going on. I started with a thorough search of the house, every closet, every drawer, every corner. In the living room, I found my photo albums rearranged. In the bedroom, a drawer of personal documents had clearly been rearranged, and in the garage on the workbench was a sheet of notes, room dimensions, notes on the condition of the walls, the approximate cost of repairs, Orson's handwriting. I took a picture of the sheet and left it where it was. It might come in handy later. The security specialist, a young guy named Lewis, had installed not only an alarm system, but 3 cameras on the front door, in the garage, and in the backyard. Now you can monitor the house through an app on your phone, he explained as he set up the system, and get notifications if someone comes in when the alarm is on. I changed all the locks, front door, back door, garage. I also changed my email, bank, and social media passwords just in case. It was a strange feeling, building defenses against my own family. Dale called this evening. Grandma, how are you? Her granddaughter's voice sounded concerned. Mom said you're installing the alarm system? Yes, I confirmed, for peace of mind. Because Daddy and Mommy came in without asking? I didn't say anything, so Dale knew. You know about their visits? She sighed. I didn't know right away. Dad mentioned at dinner that he was checking on your roof. I asked him when you'd seen him, and he said he'd just stopped by while you were gone. Mom tried to change the subject. What do you think about that? I don't like it, Dale answered honestly. It's your house. They shouldn't do that. I told them that, but, Dad said you're an old woman who doesn't know anything about real estate, and he's just looking out for you. And Mom, she's been acting weird lately. She and Dad are always whispering. I felt my heart clench with worry. Not for me, but for Dale, who was caught between 2 fires. Honey, you don't have to feel guilty. This is between me and your parents. I know, but... She hesitated. Grandma, I think they're in some kind of trouble, financially. Dad lost some big clients, and 2 weeks ago, some people came in and they had a long, heated conversation in the study. I heard my dad say something about bail and payments. The picture was starting to get clearer. Orson's in financial trouble, possibly serious, and he's suddenly showing interest in my house. Thank you for telling me, I said. Please be careful. Don't get involved in their business. I'm not going to. Dale's voice got quieter. Grandma, one more thing. I overheard them discussing your house yesterday. Dad told Mom that the house will be perfect for us when we finish renovating it. Mom asked, what about Mom? And Dad replied something like, old people belong in institutions. They are taken care of there. Dale's words hit like a slap in the face. All this time, I'd suspected Orson was up to something, but to hear the confirmation was painful, and it hurt even more to realize that Sybil, my daughter, supported the plan. I didn't want to upset you, Dale continued when I was silent for too long. But I thought you should know. You did the right thing. My voice sounded calmer than I felt. Don't worry, I'll deal with it. After talking to Dale, I couldn't calm down for a long time, walking around the house that had suddenly become a battlefield. The house I'd bought for my independent life was now the object of someone else's plans, my own family's plans against me. The next morning, while going through the mail, I noticed a letter from the Social Security Administration. Opening it, I froze in shock. It was a notice of a change of address for delivery of my pension. The address had been changed to a mailbox in San Diego that I had never set up. I immediately called customer service and explained the situation. The employee was surprised. The change was requested online 2 weeks ago, she said. We sent a confirmation to your email. I checked my email, nothing. Then I looked in my deleted folder, and there I found a confirmation email that I definitely hadn't deleted. Someone had accessed my email, someone was changing my address for my pension, and that someone was likely a member of my family. I called Faye, needing some sobering advice. Come over, she said after hearing my story, and bring any papers you have. Faye's house was like her landlady's, practical, neat, unadorned. We settled into the kitchen, where she made strong coffee. So, Faye spread my papers out on the table. Your son-in-law obviously wants to take over your house. Your daughter either supports him or is too weak to resist. They've already tried to divert your pension and have probably been looking at your house papers. I nodded, feeling oddly relieved that someone else saw the situation as clearly. The question was, what should I do? For starters, Faye sipped her coffee. You need to protect your assets. Talk to an attorney, preferably one who specializes in elder rights. Make sure all your paperwork is in order. And, she paused, think about the hidden cameras inside the house. If they break in again, you'll have proof. I thought about it. Sybil is my daughter. Have things gone so far that I need to gather evidence against her? Sybil is a grown woman who makes her own choices, Faye said harshly. If she chooses to support her husband in his plans against you, you must defend yourself, even from your own children. 2 days after my conversation with Faye, I discovered the first clear evidence of the intrusion. When I returned from the store, I found a piece of paper on the kitchen table that was definitely not there when I left. It was a draft of some kind of document, an agreement to transfer ownership of the house. My name was put in as the donor, Orson's name as the recipient. The document was incomplete, without signatures, as if someone had worked on it and forgotten to clean it up. I photocopied the paper and stashed it in the safe I'd recently installed in the pantry. Then I checked the security footage. At 12:45, a familiar silver SUV pulled up to the house. Orson and Sybil entered through the back door, using a key they weren't supposed to have. They stayed inside for about an hour, then left in a hurry when they presumably got the notice that I was coming home. I had changed the locks, but apparently they had managed to make duplicates before that. Now something more drastic was required. That night I called Dale. Hi, Grandma. Her voice sounded strained. Is everything okay? Not really, I answered honestly. Dale, your parents came over to my house today, while I was gone. Silence on the other end of the line. Yeah, I didn't know, she finally said. I swear, Grandma. I believe you, I said softly. But I need to know, have they said anything about plans for the next few days? Are they going to come again? Dale paused, as if gathering her thoughts. Dad said something about seeing Grandpa and Grandma on Sunday. Said he wanted to show them some house. She stammered. Oh my God. Your house? He's gonna show your house to his parents? It sounds like it. I tried to keep my voice calm so I wouldn't scare my granddaughter. Dale, listen. I don't want to put you between me and your parents. But please, if you hear anything more about their plans for my house, let me know. Of course, Grandma. There was determination in her voice. It's not right what they're doing. I'm on your side. After the conversation, I sat down at the kitchen table and opened my notebook. It was time to make a plan. If Orson was going to show my house to his parents on Sunday, I had 3 days to prepare, and I was going to make the most of them. Sunday morning was clear and warm. Typical Calexico weather for this time of year. The sun bright but not hot, with a slight breeze bringing the smell of the desert. I sat on my porch with a cup of coffee, watching a neighbor's cat sneak across my yard, hunting unseen prey. After talking to Dale, I decided I needed to get ready for Orson's visit with my parents. My granddaughter called last night and confirmed my suspicions. They were indeed planning to arrive today, around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Sybil informed Dale that they would check on Grandma and show Grandpa and Grandma her new house at the same time. I pretended I didn't know anything. Yesterday, I called Sybil and told her I was leaving for an all-day trip to El Centro for a book club meeting. Sybil seemed strangely relieved by my absence and didn't even offer to reschedule their visit for another day. "Don't worry, Mom," she said with feigned concern. "We'll just stop by to see if the house is okay. Maybe water your plants." "Thank you, dear," I replied, trying to make my voice sound sincere. "The keys are under the flower pot to the left of the door." Of course, no keys were there. I wanted to see how they would get into the house, with their duplicates or by picking the lock. Faye fully supported my plan. "You're doing the right thing," she said when I explained my intentions. "Sometimes you have to let people reveal their cards before you show yours. Instead of the book club, I plan to go to a mall near my home. There, I could spend a few hours, being far enough away to return quickly if the cameras showed something interesting." I finished my coffee and went to get ready. I put on a light blue dress and a straw hat, an outfit in which I would be easily spotted in stores. I cleaned the house like I was expecting guests, checked that all the cameras were working and that the app on my phone showed their footage without delay. At 11 o'clock, I left the house with a large bag and gardening gloves. Sybil often drove by my house unannounced, and I wanted the neighbors to see me leave to work in the garden at a friend's house. I actually drove to Sun Valley Mall and spent several hours going from store to store, checking the cameras on my phone periodically. At 2 hours and 30 minutes, the app sent a notification, "Movement at the front door." I quickly opened the video and saw Orson's silver SUV parked in front of my house. 4 people got out of the car. Orson, Sybil, and an elderly couple I'd only seen in pictures before. Orson's parents, Atticus and Enid Cromley, were visiting for the first time since I moved to Calexico. I watched them walk to the door. Orson pulls out a bunch of keys not from under the pot as I suggested, but from his own pocket, his own duplicates. So my suspicions are confirmed. Looking at the phone screen, I felt a wave of anger rising inside. These people, my family, were invading my home like thieves. I quickly paid for my tea, which I didn't even have time to finish, and headed for the exit. It was time to go home sooner than they expected. The drive from the mall to home took about 20 minutes. I drove, gripping the steering wheel tightly and repeating to myself, "Take it easy, Merle. Don't give yourself away. Let them show their true intentions first." A block before the house, I parked. I didn't want the sound of the car pulling up to scare them away. I walked the rest of the way, trying to stay in the shade of the trees. Orson's SUV was still parked in front of the house, but there was no one outside. I walked quietly around the back of the house, through the garden, to the back door that led directly into the kitchen. That door creaked, so I didn't usually use it, but now it was the perfect place to sneak into my own home unnoticed. Slowly turning the key, I opened the door just enough to slip inside. There were voices coming from the living room. I took off my shoes and tiptoed through the kitchen to the hallway, where I could hear but remain invisible. Dash 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 Merle isn't old enough to handle a house this big. We'll convince her she'll be better off at Golden Gardens. Is that new nursing home in El Centro? A woman, presumably Enid, asked. That's right, Orson confirmed. It's a very nice place. Round-the-clock care, meals, entertainment, and most importantly, safe. Merle would be happy there. I bit my lip to keep from making a sound. They were discussing my life, my future, as if I were an incapacitated old woman, not a person with a will of my own. And if she refuses? Atticus's voice sounded skeptical. She won't. It was Sybil. Mother always listened to reasonable arguments. We'll explain that it's for her own good. Besides, Orson added, there are other ways. I've already started the process. Small changes to her accounts, redirecting correspondence. In a couple months, we can file for a declaration of incompetency if we need to. My blood froze in my veins. They were planning to incapacitate me? To incapacitate a woman who'd spent her life teaching physics, managing the family budget, and even moving to another city on her own after her husband died? Orson. Enid's voice sounded uncertain. That doesn't seem right. It is Sybil's mother, after all. Mother, Orson said impatiently, you wouldn't understand. We're on the verge of bankruptcy. Those damn investors backed out at the last minute, and now the bank is demanding repayment of the loan. If we don't find the money in the next month, we lose everything. And Merle's house will solve all the problems? Atticus asked. Not exactly, Orson answered, but it's a start. The house is worth about $300,000. If we sell it, we can pay off some of the debt. And in Golden Gardens, there are options with installment payments. Merle can sign an agreement where we agree to pay her monthly rent. Which we will, of course, Sybil added hastily. It's just important to get the cash quickly now. I felt nauseous. They weren't just going to take my house. They planned to use me as a tool to solve their financial problems. And my daughter, my own daughter, was backing that plan. And the inheritance? Enid asked. Hadn't Bert left her something? Insurance, Sybil replied. She spent most of it on the house. The rest is in accounts, but we can't get access to them until she's, as long as I'm alive, you mean? Or as long as I'm sane? Either way, their plan was becoming more and more obvious. Let's see the house, Orson said, changing the subject. I think you'll like it. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, garage. The backyard is a little neglected, but we'll clean it up when we move in. I heard footsteps. They were heading for the stairs. Quickly retreating into the kitchen, I pressed myself against the wall, praying they wouldn't decide to look in here. Thankfully, the group passed by, heading up to the second floor. Their voices grew quieter, but I could still hear Orson describing the benefits of the house. Once they disappeared upstairs, I slipped back into the hallway and crept up the stairs so I could hear better. This room is perfect for Dale when she comes up for the weekend, Orson said, showing me what I was using as a guest bedroom. And this is where Sybil and I will set up the office. And where will Merle live when she comes over from? What did you call this place? Atticus asked. Golden Gardens, Orson answered. Well, if she feels like coming, she can stay in the little room next to the laundry room. But I doubt she'll come often. At her age, it's better to be under the care of professionals. I heard them moving further down the hallway toward the master bedroom, my bedroom. Oh, it's just beautiful, Enid exclaimed. Such a view from the window. The master bedroom will be ours, Orson said. We'll have a room next door for Mom, the one with the private bath. Your father and I are moving in here? Enid sounded surprised. Sure, Orson replied. Sell your store and we'll all live together. A family nest. I stood leaning against the wall, trying to digest what I'd heard. They weren't just planning to put me in a nursing home. They were going to turn my house into a family nest for the entire Cromley clan, without me. The group began to descend, and I quickly retreated back into the kitchen, lurking behind the pantry door. Needs some repairs, Orson said as they came down the stairs. But we can do it in a couple months. It'll be ready by summer. What if your mother-in-law doesn't agree to move into a nursing home? Atticus asked again, clearly not convinced by his son's plan. Dad, I explained. Orson sounded impatient. We don't have a choice. Either we get this house or we lose everything. Sybil agrees, don't you, dear? Mama will be better off in a specialized facility, Sybil replied, but her voice trembled. She's getting forgetful. Last time she couldn't even remember where she'd put her keys. That was a lie. I've never forgotten where I put things. Has Sybil started making up symptoms to justify their plan? And when are you going to tell her about this plan? Enid asked. Next week, Orson answered. We'll take her to dinner and gently lead her to the idea. We'll show her the Golden Gardens brochures, tell her the benefits. She's a sensible woman. She'll realize it's for her own good. I heard them go into the living room. I slipped out the back door as quietly as I'd come in. My heart was pounding. My hands were shaking. I needed to leave before the anger and pain took over, and I made my presence known. Walking around the house, I took a quick step toward where I'd left the car. Once inside, I let myself exhale. Tears streamed down my cheeks, not from grief, but from rage. How could they? How could my own daughter be a part of this? I sat in the car until I saw Orson's SUV drive by. They finished their tour and drove off, unaware that their plans had been revealed. When I got home, the first thing I did was call Faye. They came, I said as soon as she answered the phone. And I heard everything. How bad is it? She asked without preamble. Worse than we thought. I briefly recounted the conversation I'd overheard. They don't just want my house. They're planning to declare me incompetent and put me in a nursing home so they can access my accounts. Jesus, Faye exhaled. What are you going to do? I took a deep breath. For starters, change all the locks. Again, and put in more deadbolts. Then I'm going to talk to a lawyer, a real lawyer, who specializes in elder law. And I'm going to surprise them in a way they're not expecting. Do you need help? Faye asked. Dash. My nephew works for a security firm. He can install the most secure locks there are. Thank you, I said, feeling grateful for her support. That would be wonderful. After talking to Faye, I walked around the house, trying to see it through the eyes of Orson and his parents. They had already assigned rooms, planned renovations, discussed where they would live, in my house, without me. In the bedroom, I noticed the dresser drawers were ajar, as if someone had been rummaging through them. On the bedside table, Bert's picture stood at a different angle. In the bathroom, my toiletries were shifted as if someone was studying the labels. They were searching my house, examining my belongings, planning my life without my knowledge or consent. All this time, I'd thought Orson was just taking an unhealthy interest in my real estate, but the reality was far worse. It was a conspiracy, carefully planned, encompassing every aspect of my life. I sat down on the bed, feeling anger give way to determination. All my life I'd been a cautious, reasonable woman. I'd yielded when necessary, made compromises, put the needs of others before my own. But not this time. Now I'm going to fight for myself, for my home, for my independence. Bert always said I had a steely temper underneath the soft shell. You're like those exotic fruits that are soft on the outside but have a hard bone inside. He joked. It was time to show this bone to my family. I pulled out a notebook and started making a list of things I needed to do. Locks, a lawyer, bank accounts, paperwork, and a surprise for Orson and Sybil when they came to talk to me about moving to Golden Gardens. Orson thought he was dealing with a weak, naive old woman. He was sorely mistaken. I'd spent 35 years teaching teenagers the laws of physics. I knew all about action and counteraction. And the counteraction that awaited my son-in-law would be equal to his meanness multiplied by my anger. As Bert used to say, don't make your physics teacher angry. She knows too many ways to make your life unpleasant without violating the laws of thermodynamics. I smiled at that memory and continued writing the plan. The battle for my house was just beginning, and I intended to win. I spent the night after the overheard conversation without sleep. I lay staring at the ceiling, replaying the events of the last few months in my head. How strangely memory works. Moments that seemed insignificant now formed a clear picture of the conspiracy. She remembered Orson insisting on checking the deeds to the house before she bought it. How he'd shaken his head disapprovingly, telling me I was overpaying. How strangely interested in the state of my bank accounts at Thanksgiving dinner with my family. Back then, I wrote off his behavior as the professional deformity of a mortgage broker or the usual male desire to control the financial decisions of the women in the family. But now every episode took on an ominous tinge. I remembered how Sybil had casually dropped it at lunch that their neighbor, a woman my age, had been hospitalized after a house fall. It's so dangerous to live alone at your age, Mom, she said then with exaggerated concern. I never thought that my own daughter could be complicit in an attempt to deprive me of my home and independence. But now, as I analyzed her behavior, I saw that Sybil had always been prone to manipulation. As a child, she had been able to get her way through tears and emotional blackmail. Bert called it persuasiveness. I considered it capriciousness. We often argued about how to raise her. He wanted to spoil her more. I insisted on discipline. Perhaps I was too strict, or not strict enough. I can't figure out now what caused my daughter to grow up to be a woman willing to send her mother to a nursing home for financial gain. I got up this morning with a heavy head, but with a clear plan of action. The first thing I did was call Faye's nephew, Liam. He turned out to be a serious young man with tattoos on his arms and a professional outlook on security. Dash Mrs. Havisham, he said after examining my locks. These can be opened with a regular credit card. You need a 21st century security system, not these museum pieces. By noon, all the locks in the house had been replaced with new ones with electronic keys that couldn't be duplicated without a special code. Additionally, Liam installed deadbolts that can only be locked from the inside and a video surveillance system with motion sensors. Now your house is better protected than most banks around here, he assured me. If someone tries to enter without your permission, you'll know instantly. And you can call the police at the touch of a button. I thanked him and paid in cash. I didn't want Orson to be able to trace the transaction if he somehow gained access to my bank accounts. The next step was a visit to a lawyer. Faye recommended Nomi Page, who specialized in elder law defense. Her office was in El Centro, an hour's drive from Calexico. Nomi turned out to be a middle-aged woman with a discerning eye and a business-like approach. After hearing my story, she showed no surprise. Unfortunately, Mrs. Havisham, your case is not unique, she said, taking notes. Financial abuse of the elderly, especially by family members, is common. It's good that you sought help before the situation became irreversible. We spent the next 2 hours discussing my options. Nomi suggested several solutions that would protect me and my assets from Orson and Sybil's encroachment. The first thing to do, she said, is to create an inviolable trust for your home and major assets. That means that even if your relatives somehow get you declared incompetent, which is highly unlikely given your clear mind, they won't be able to gain control of your assets. I agreed. Nomi also suggested that I make a durable power of attorney in the event of incapacity, but not for Sybil or Orson, but for an independent trusted representative. I can recommend several reliable firms that specialize in the administration of estates for elderly clients, she said. They will act solely in your best interests, without the emotional involvement that often disturbs relatives. We also discussed a new will that would clearly define my wishes regarding inheritance and health care. I decided that some of my assets would still go to Sybil. She's my daughter, no matter what. But I planned to leave a larger share to Dale, with the stipulation that she could only manage them when she reached the age of 25. What about the tapes of the conversations I overheard? I asked. Could I use them as evidence of their intentions? Nomi wondered. In a court of law, not likely, if it was made without their knowledge. But as a means of persuasion in a personal confrontation, yes. Sometimes the mere realization that their plans had been revealed could make people back off. I walked out of Nomi's office with a folder of documents to review and a feeling that control of the situation was back in my hands. We agreed to meet in 3 days to sign all the necessary papers. On the way home, I stopped at the bank and opened a new account at another financial institution into which I transferred a significant portion of my savings. I also ordered new credit cards and closed the old ones. If Orson had somehow gotten access to my financial information, it didn't matter now. At home, I got a call from Sybil. Mom, Dad, and I are thinking of coming over this Friday, she said in that special tone of voice she used when she wanted to beg for something. We have something important we want to discuss. Of course, darling, I replied, trying to keep my voice normal. Come over for dinner. I'll make your favorite lasagna. Wonderful. Sybil seemed encouraged by my agreement. Mom, could you invite Dale too? She's on vacation right now, and it would be good for her to participate in our conversation. I tensed up. They wanted to involve Dale in their plan? Use her to put pressure on me? Of course I'll call her, I said, but you know how busy today's students are. I'm not sure she'll be able to make it. After talking to Sybil, I immediately called Dale. My granddaughter picked up after the first ringtone, as if she'd been expecting a call. Grandma, is everything all right? Yes, sweetheart, I tried to be calm. Your mom just called. She and your dad are coming over for dinner Friday night, and they want you to be there. Oh, she sounded worried. Did they tell you why? They just want to discuss something important. I paused. Dale, do you know what it might be? I paused again. I'm not sure, she said finally. But they've been talking a lot lately about how hard it is for you to live alone. Dad mentioned someplace. Golden Gardens? So Dale isn't fully on board with their plan. That's good. Dale, I want you to come, I said. But before your parents do, can you be here tomorrow? Sure, Grandma, she answered without hesitation. Is something wrong? I'll tell you when you get here. I didn't want to discuss it over the phone. Just come. I spent the next day preparing for Dale's visit, not just emotionally, but practically as well. I gathered all the evidence of Orson and Sybil's machinations, including camera footage, copies of the documents they'd examined in my absence, and the notes Orson had left at the house. Dale arrived toward evening. She looked worried, and when she hugged me on the doorstep, I felt her shoulders tense. Grandma, what's going on? She asked as soon as we entered the house. You sounded so strange on the phone. I led her into the living room, where I had already prepared tea and cookies, little normal rituals that helped keep her calm in an abnormal situation. Dale, I need to tell you something unpleasant, I began as we sat down, and I need to know how much you know about what's going on. I told her what I'd overheard on Sunday, about Orson and Sybil's plans to put me in a nursing home, to sell my house to cover their debts, and even their attempts to gain control of my finances. Dale listened with eyes widened with horror. When I finished, she shook her head. I knew something was wrong, she said quietly. Dad kept talking about your house, about what an underappreciated asset it was. And Mom started mentioning how hard it was for you to live alone. But I didn't think, she hesitated, I didn't think they'd go this far. You didn't know what they were planning? I watched her reaction carefully. No, Dale exclaimed. Grandma, how could you think I'd be a part of this? I would never. I didn't think you were. I interrupted her gently. But I had to make sure they weren't trying to use you. Dale shook her head, tears in her eyes. I'm so ashamed of them, she whispered. How could they do this to you? I took her hand. It's not your fault, sweetheart, and I don't want you to feel like you have to choose between me and your parents. But they're wrong, Dale exclaimed. They're trying to take away your home, your independence. It's disgusting. I nodded, feeling oddly relieved that I could finally talk openly about the situation with someone in the family. Yes, it is, and I'm not going to let them do it. But I need your help. I told her about my plan, how I'd already changed the locks and installed additional security, how I'd met with an attorney and started the process of protecting my assets, and about what I planned to do with Orson and Sybil on Friday. When they come with their proposal, I'll be ready, I said. But I need you to be here, not for confrontation, but as a witness. They may try to distort what happened later, say I was acting irrationally or out of control. Your presence would be a deterrent. Dale listened attentively, nodding occasionally. I'll be here, Grandma, she said firmly. But what if they try to use me against you? What if they start pushing guilt or responsibility? It was a reasonable question. Dale had always been susceptible to manipulation, especially by Sybil, who played masterfully on maternal love and filial duty. Then you must remember one thing, I said, squeezing her hand. You are an adult who is entitled to your own opinion. Your first responsibility is to yourself and your values. If you think what they're doing is wrong, don't be afraid to say so. Dale nodded, her gaze becoming determined. I won't let them manipulate me, she said, and I won't let them hurt you. We talked late into the night, going over the details of the upcoming meeting. Dale stayed the night in the guest room, the same room that Orson had already mentally converted into Dale's room for the weekend. In the morning, I woke up feeling like I'd gotten a good night's sleep for the first time in a long time. Determination and a plan of action brought a calmness I hadn't had before. Dale and I ate breakfast on the veranda, enjoying the early sunshine and cool morning air. She talked about her college classes, her psychology course that was harder than she expected, her new friends. A normal conversation between grandmother and granddaughter, an island of normalcy in the sea of craziness that was going on around us. After breakfast, I showed Dale the documents I'd prepared with Nomi's help: the new will, the powers of attorney, the trust deed. Explained how they worked and what they meant for the future. "You're leaving me all this?" She was surprised when she saw the section on inheritance. "Not all of it," I clarified. "Your mother will still get her share. But yes, most of it is for you, with the stipulation that you can only dispose of the money after you're 25. But why?" Dale looked confused. "I haven't done anything to deserve it." "It's not about what you did or didn't deserve," I said softly. "The point is that I want you to be able to live your life, to make decisions based on your desires, not financial necessity. Bert left that money to me so I could be independent. Now I want the same for you." Dale hugged me, and I felt her shoulders shake with held-back tears. "Thank you, Grandma," she whispered. "But I hope I don't get that inheritance for a long, long time." I laughed. "I hope so too, sweetheart. I plan to live long enough to see you finish your degree, find your dream job, and maybe even give me great-grandchildren." We spent the rest of the day preparing for Orson and Sybil's arrival. I made the promised lasagna, an old recipe from Bert's mother that Sybil had adored since she was a child. Dale helped with the salad and dessert, humming a tune I didn't recognize. In between cooking, we discussed strategy for the evening, how to react to different scenarios, what to say, when to keep quiet. I didn't want open conflict, at least not right away. I wanted to hear their proposal in full first, to let them reveal all their cards. "But what if they start pushing?" Dale asked, slicing tomatoes for the salad. "What if Dad starts talking about your safety and well-being as if you're not capable of taking care of yourself?" "Then I'll listen," I replied, stirring the dressing, listening and memorizing. "And when they're done, I'll give them the facts. All the facts." By 4 o'clock in the afternoon, everything was ready. The food and our strategy. Dale and I were sitting in the living room, trying to distract ourselves with reading, when my phone vibrated. A text from Sybil. "Checking out. Be there in an hour." I took a deep breath, staring at the screen. An hour and the battle for my home, my independence, my life would begin. A battle with my own daughter and her husband. "They're on their way out," I said to Dale. She put the book aside and took my hand. "We're ready, Grandma." "We're going to make it." I nodded, feeling a surge of gratitude toward this young woman who was wiser and stronger than my parents. In that moment, I realized that no matter the outcome of tonight, I had already won the most important thing. I was not alone in this struggle. "Yes," I said, squeezing her hand. "We can do this." We sat like that, holding hands, until we heard the sound of a car pull up. Orson and Sybil had arrived, unaware that what awaited them was not a defenseless old woman ready to give up her home and her independence, but a well-prepared adversary with evidence of their machinations and a determination to defend what was rightfully hers. The doorbell rang at exactly 6 o'clock in the evening. I adjusted the collar of my blouse, cast a quick glance at Dale, who nodded encouragingly, and went to open the door. Orson and Sybil were standing on the doorstep, he in a navy blue suit, as if for a business meeting, she in a light gray dress, a nervous smile on her lips. "Mother." Sybil stepped forward, hugging me a little tighter than usual. "You look wonderful." "Good evening, Merle." Orson held out a bottle of wine. "Merlot, your favorite." I smiled and accepted the bottle. I wondered when Merlot became my favorite wine. I'd always preferred Pinot Noir, and Orson knew it. A little lie to create an air of caring, or just a play on words with my name? "Come in," I said, stepping aside. "Dale's already here." "Dale?" Sybil looked surprised. "She arrived earlier." "Yes, yesterday." I deliberately didn't explain why. She was helping me with dinner. We went into the living room, where Dale was sitting in a chair with a book. She put it aside and stood up to say hello to her parents. The hug with her mother looked strained. With her father, she just exchanged a brief nod. "How long have you been here, Sunshine?" Orson asked, sitting down on the couch next to Sybil. "Yesterday afternoon," Dale replied. "I had some free time between classes, so I decided to visit my grandmother." Sybil glanced at Orson. Was there a flicker of concern? They hadn't expected Dale's presence during their serious conversation. "Wonderful," Orson said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "A full family dinner. I suggested drinks, wine for the adults, juice for Dale, who didn't drink alcohol." Sybil seemed nervous, constantly fixing her hair and casting glances at her husband as if looking for support. Orson, on the contrary, radiated the confidence of a man who holds all the trumps. The conversation over an aperitif was casual: the weather, Dale College news, the latest happenings in town. I watched my daughter and son-in-law carefully, noting how they studiously skirted the subject of the purpose of their visit. As we moved to the table, Sybil gasped delightedly at the sight of the lasagna. "Mother, you remember. My favorite." "Of course I remember," I replied with a smile. "I have a good memory for many things." Orson raised his glass. "To family, to being together and taking care of each other." We drank. The irony of his toast didn't escape me, but I kept my expression calm. Let them think I didn't suspect a thing. Dinner passed in an atmosphere of strained nonchalance. Sybil was asking Dale about college. Orson was talking about the new mall being built in San Diego. I kept up the conversation and occasionally caught a glance from Dale, concerned, questioning. I subtly shook my head. "It's not time yet." After dessert, apple pie with vanilla ice cream, Orson coughed and straightened up. It was the sign I'd been waiting for. "It's starting." "Merle," he said, blotting his lips with a napkin. "Sybil and I wanted to talk to you about something important. Dash, dash, yeah, question mark." I acted surprised. "What was it?" Sybil took her husband's hand as if seeking support. "Mother, we're worried about you," she began in that peculiar tone of voice she always used when she wanted something from me. "You live here alone, so far from us." "I like living alone," I said softly. "And Calexico isn't that far away." "It's not just about distance," Orson interjected. "It's about safety. It's a big house. It's a lot of maintenance. And at your age—" "At my age?" I raised an eyebrow. "And what is my age, Orson?" He looked a little embarrassed. "You look fine, Merle, but 67 is an age when you have to think about comfort and security." I noticed the way Dale clenched her fists under the table. She could hardly restrain herself from intervening. "What do you suggest?" I asked, pouring myself a cup of tea. Sybil perked up. "We've found a wonderful place, Mother. Golden Gardens isn't just a nursing home. It's a real community for active seniors. There's a swimming pool, a library, hobby groups, and medical staff around the clock," Orson added, "which is no small thing at any age." I listened in silence, noting how they were painstakingly painting a picture of an elderly paradise. Sybil pulled a glossy brochure out of her bag and placed it in front of me. "Look at how bright the rooms are." She opened to a page of photographs. "And the garden is gorgeous. You like gardening. You'll love it." I took the brochure and slowly flipped through the pages. Indeed, the place looked decent, but the prices in the small print at the bottom of the page were very impressive. "It looks expensive," I said. "Don't worry about that," Orson said quickly. "We've thought of everything. If we sold this house, we'd have enough money to live in Golden Gardens for years. That's it." Finally, they got to the bottom of their plan. "Sell my house?" I tried to make my voice sound surprised but not outraged. but I just bought it recently, and I like it. Of course, Mother. Sybil put her hand on mine. But think rationally. Why do you need such a big house? So much worry, so much maintenance. In Golden Gardens, you'll have a cozy apartment. No trouble with cleaning or repairs. Orson picked up. And we could buy the house. I've already consulted with a realtor, and he thinks it's a good time to sell. You consulted a realtor about selling my house? I let a note of surprise slip into my voice. Orson paled slightly, realizing the gaffe. Not that I consulted, just asking a colleague's opinion about the real estate market in the area. I see. I nodded, as if accepting his explanation. And you and Sybil want to buy my house? We thought it would be convenient for everyone, Orson began excitedly, seeing that I wasn't rejecting the idea right away. You get the means to live comfortably in Golden Gardens, and we get the home we already know and love. Papa, Dale intervened suddenly, what will happen to Grandma's things? Her furniture, her books, her mineral collection? Orson looked annoyed at his daughter's interference. There's room in the Golden Gardens for personal belongings, he said. Not everything, of course, but the most important things Grandmother can take with her. And the rest? Dale insisted. The rest? He hesitated. We could sell it or store it in our garage. I could see Dale was ready to erupt, so I lightly touched her arm under the table. Not now. That's an interesting suggestion, I said, leaning back in my chair. You must have given it a lot of thought. Yes, Mother. Sybil seemed encouraged by my response. We only want what's best for you. It's getting dangerous to live alone at your age. What if you fall or fall ill? Who will help you? That's true, I said thoughtfully. Loneliness can be dangerous. Orson and Sybil exchanged triumphant glances. They thought they'd convinced me. I'm glad you understand, Merle, Orson said with a patronizing smile. We can arrange a visit to the Golden Gardens as early as next week. Take a look, get to know the staff. And when do you plan to move here? I asked casually. Sybil laughed nervously. Well, it's not urgent. First, we need to make sure you're comfortable in your new place and decide what to do with my things, I added. Yes, that too, Orson nodded. But don't worry, we'll organize everything. I know someone at the moving company, and they'll help with the move. I slowly finished my tea and put the cup on the table. You know, I've organized something too, I said calmly. Dale, honey, would you get the file from my office? The one on the desk. Dale nodded and walked out. Orson and Sybil looked a little puzzled. What file? Sybil asked. The files, I answered. Since we're discussing my future and the future of this house, I've prepared some suggestions. Dale returned with a black leather folder and handed it to me. I opened it and pulled out the first document. This is an agreement to put my house into an inviolable trust, I said, placing the document on the table. I signed it yesterday. According to this document, the house can't be sold or transferred to anyone while I'm alive. After I die, it will go to an independent trustee who will act according to my instructions. Orson stared at the document, his face beginning to redden. What does this mean? He asked in a strained voice. It means that my house is protected from being sold, I answered calmly. Even if someone were to somehow get me declared incompetent, which was highly unlikely, this house would be mine until the day I died. Sybil turned pale. Mother, what are you talking about? No one is going to declare you incompetent. I took out a second document. This is my new will. I've made a few changes. You'll still get your share, Sybil, but most of my estate will go to Dale. With certain conditions, of course. But why? Sybil looked shocked. What's going on, Mother? Instead of answering, I took the tablet out of the folder and turned it on. I turned the screen so everyone could see. This is the video from the security camera in my house, I said, pressing play. Here you are, Orson and Sybil, entering my house in my absence. With your parents, Orson. The 17th, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The screen clearly shows Orson opening the front door with his key and the whole group entering the house. Orson and Sybil look at the tape with horror. And here's the audio of your conversation, I continued, switching the file. Technically, I shouldn't have recorded you without your knowledge, but I don't think you'd mind, given the circumstances. Orson's voice came from the tablet speaker. Beautiful house, son. But I don't understand why you think your mother-in-law would agree to sell it to you. Not sell it, Dad. We'll just borrow it for a while. Merle's not old anymore. It's getting hard for her to manage such a big house. We'll convince her she'll be better off at Golden Gardens. I stopped the tape. There was a heavy silence in the room. You entered my house without permission, I said quietly, planning how to get rid of me and take possession of my property. You even told your father that the master bedroom would be yours and the room next door for your mother. I assume you meant your mother, Enid, not me, because you were planning a room for me in the Golden Gardens. Orson opened his mouth but didn't utter a word. Sybil began to cry. Mother, it's not what you think. She finally squeezed out. No? I raised an eyebrow. Then, what is it, Sybil? Explain to me how else to interpret your husband's words that you're going to borrow my house and put me in a nursing home, or his phrase that you might apply for a declaration of incapacity if I didn't agree voluntarily. Sybil shifted her gaze to Orson, who sat with his jaw clenched. Orson? Her voice trembled. Were you eavesdropping on us? Orson turned to me instead of answering his wife, his face contorted with anger. Have you been spying on your own family? No, Orson, I answered calmly. I was protecting myself from people who invaded my home and planned to take away my independence for financial gain. I happened to come home that day and overheard your conversation. And yes, I recorded it because I knew you would deny it. I pulled another document out of the folder. And this is a copy of the change of address form for my pension that someone filled out on my behalf. San Diego P.O. Box. Do you know anything about this, Orson? He blushed, but remained silent. Mom, Sybil sobbed, we just wanted to take care of you. You really would be better off in a specialized facility. Don't lie to me again, Sybil. My voice became harsher. I heard Orson telling his father about your financial problems, that you're on the verge of bankruptcy and you need money fast. My house and my savings is what you were interested in, not my well-being. Dale, who had been silent until then, suddenly stood up. How could you? Her voice shook with anger. She is your mother, my grandmother, and you treated her like an obstacle to be removed. Orson stood up too. Dale, you don't understand. Sometimes you have to make tough decisions for your family. What family? She interrupted. The kind that gets rid of elderly relatives when they become inconvenient, or the kind that supports each other no matter what. Sybil sobbed, covering her face with her hands. It's not like that. We were really worried about Mom. I put my hand on Dale's shoulder, reassuring her, and turned to my daughter. Sybil, look at me. She lifted her crying face. I know you love me in your own way, I said quietly. But you let Orson convince you of a plan that would hurt me and rob me of my dignity. You chose his side against your mother. I didn't mean to, she started. But you did. I shook my head. And now we have to live with the consequences of that choice. I looked at Orson, who was standing there, fists clenched, with the expression of a cornered predator. I want you to leave, I said firmly, both of you, and don't come back. You can't just kick us out of your life, Orson objected. We're your family. Family doesn't do what you did, I replied. And yes, I can. My house is protected by a trust. My accounts are transferred to another bank. The locks have been changed. The security system is in place. If you try to enter again without my permission, the cameras will record it, and I will file a trespassing report with the police. Sybil stood up, trembling. Mommy, please, let's talk. We can fix this. Not now, Sybil. I shook my head. Dash. Maybe someday, but not today. I turned to Dale. Dale's staying with me for the weekend. You can socialize with her when she gets home. It's her choice, and I'll respect it, whatever it is. Dale stood beside me, her face a look of determination. I'm staying with my grandmother, she said firmly, and I need time to process everything I've learned today. Orson grabbed his jacket. Come on, Sybil. We're not welcome here. Sybil hesitated, looking at me with a pleading look in her eyes. Mommy. Go, Sybil, I said gently. Think about what you've done and why. If you ever want to talk, really talk, without manipulation or lies, I'll be here. They left, Orson with quick, angry steps, Sybil, crying and looking around. I closed the door behind them and turned the key in the lock. A symbolic gesture. I was closing the door not only of my house, but of a certain period of my life. Dale stood in the hallway, her shoulders shaking. I walked over and hugged her. It's okay, sweetheart, I whispered. It's not your fault they did what they did. I can't believe they did this, she said, sobbing. How could they do that to you? I sighed, stroking her hair. Fear and greed make people do terrible things, even to those they love. Your father was afraid of losing his money and status. Your mother was afraid of losing his love, and they both decided I was an acceptable sacrifice. We went back into the living room and sat on the couch. The table was still littered with dishes from the dinner that had ended so abruptly. Leftover lasagna, unfinished wine, and uneaten dessert were evidence of broken family bonds. What now? Dale asked, wiping away tears. I looked at the papers scattered across the table, the evidence of betrayal and my defenses against it. Now we move on, I said simply. Each in our own way. Me, here in my home, free of manipulation and fear. Your parents, with their consequences. And you. You have to find your own way, Dale. I'm not asking you to choose between us. They're still your parents, despite what they've done. Dale shook her head. I don't know if I can trust them again. Or respect them after this. Trust and respect have to be earned, I said. Maybe someday they'll realize what they've lost and try to make up for their mistakes. Maybe they won't, but that's their choice, not yours. We sat in silence, thinking about what had happened. It was dark outside the window, and the lights of the neighboring houses flickered in the evening gloom. Somewhere a dog barked, a car drove by. Normal life went on, despite the drama that had played out in my house. Aren't you scared? Dale asked after a long silence. Being alone, with no family around? I smiled and took her hand. I have you, and Faye 3 houses down, and new friends I'll meet again. I'm not alone, Dale, and I never will be, as long as I have the choice to stay open to new relationships or shut down in bitterness and resentment. You're wiser than I'll ever be, Dale said with a slight smile. No, I shook my head. I've just had more time to learn from mistakes, my own and others. You're already wiser than your parents, even though you're much younger. We began to clear the table slowly, methodically, restoring order to the house after the emotional storm. Each plate, each appliance put back in its place symbolized a small step toward a new normal. You know, I said, folding the tablecloth, your Grandpa Bert often said that life is a series of doors. Some open, others close. Sometimes we choose which door to go through. Sometimes the choice is made for us. But behind every closed door, there is a new one waiting to be opened. Dale hugged me, and I felt her body relax for the first time this long evening. I love you, Grandma, she whispered. I love you too, sweetheart, I replied, looking over her shoulder at my house. Quiet, peaceful, mine. And I'm not going anywhere. It had been 3 months since the night I'd broken things off with Sybil and Orson. 3 months of a new life, no intrusive phone calls, no unsolicited visits, no constant feeling that there was a conspiracy going on behind my back. 3 months of freedom. The first weeks were the most difficult. Sybil tried to contact me, calling, texting, even sending a letter in the mail with a lengthy apology and explanation. I read it but didn't reply. The memories of her sitting next to Orson, nodding in response to his plans to send me to a nursing home, were too fresh. Orson, on the other hand, made no attempt to connect. No calls, no texts, no emails. Complete silence. Dale said he forbade my name from being mentioned at home as if I no longer existed. Mom cries at night, Dale said during one of her visits. Dad pretends nothing's going on. He goes to work, comes back, shuts himself in his office. They barely talk to each other. I didn't feel satisfied with the news. Despite everything that had happened, Sybil was still my daughter, and the thought of her suffering brought no joy. But I also realized that I couldn't, and shouldn't, accept responsibility for the consequences of their own actions. Dale came every 2 weeks, usually for the weekend. She had decided to stay living at her parents' house until she graduated from college, for economic reasons, as she explained, but I suspected she was also worried about Sybil. Despite her anger, she still loved her mother and didn't want to leave her alone in this situation. You're doing the right thing, I told her. Family relationships are complicated. What happened between me and your parents shouldn't define your relationship with them. Dale hugged me gratefully. You're amazing, Grandma. I don't know if I could be so understanding if I were you. When you get to my age, you'll realize that life is too short for endless grudges. I did what I had to do to protect myself, but that doesn't mean I have to hate them for the rest of my life. And that was the truth. I didn't hate Sybil or even Orson. I felt disappointment, sadness, occasional anger, but not hatred. They'd made their choices, I'd made mine. Now we were all living with the consequences. My life in Calexico was slowly taking on a new rhythm. Faye became a close friend. We met regularly for tea, exchanged books, sometimes went shopping together in El Centro. She introduced me to others in our neighborhood, mostly retirees who had moved to Calexico from colder states to enjoy the warm climate and relatively low cost of living. See, Faye said as we drove back from a local garden club meeting. This place is full of people just like us, free, independent, with opinions of their own, a real community. The garden club became one of my favorite things to do. Every Wednesday, we would meet at the local community center, discussing plants suitable for the desert climate, exchanging seedlings and tips. Through these meetings, my backyard was slowly transformed into a blooming oasis, with cacti, succulents, and drought-tolerant flowers that did well in Calexico's hot climate. One day, while working in the garden, I noticed a neighbor boy watching me through the fence. He was about 14 years old, with a serious look behind the glasses. Hi, I said, wiping my hands on my garden apron. You must be Ethan? From across the street? He nodded, a little embarrassed. Mom said you used to teach physics, he said. Is that true? 35 years at San Diego High School, I confirmed. Why? Ethan shifted from foot to foot. I don't understand the topic on inertia and moments, and the test is in 2 weeks. I thought, maybe, and so began my private lessons. At first, just with Ethan, then 2 more of his classmates joined. Soon, on Thursdays and Saturdays, my dining room was transformed into a makeshift classroom where I explained Newton's laws, electromagnetism, and the basics of quantum physics. It brought me back to what I had always loved: teaching. Unlike regular school, there were no administrative requirements, endless meetings, and paperwork. It was just me, interested students, and the pure joy of imparting knowledge. I charged a token fee for lessons, enough to cover the cost of materials and supplement my budget a little. But the real reward was the teenagers' burning eyes when they finally understood a complex concept, or their enthusiastic cheers when an experiment yielded the expected result. Faye joked that I had created my own academy, Madame Curie of Calexico. She laughed. Soon you'll have a line of students. In a way, she was right. By the end of the second month, I had 7 regular students, and parents started asking if I could also help with math and chemistry. Math, maybe, I replied. Chemistry is just theory. I'm not going to turn my kitchen into a lab with potentially explosive substances. My new life was taking shape and making sense. In the mornings, I worked in the garden. In the afternoons, I tutored students or met with friends from the garden club. In the evenings, I read or talked by video link with Dale. Sometimes Faye and I would go on little excursions to Joshua Tree National Park or toward the Mexican border, where we could find amazing markets with local crafts and food. I felt more alive than I had in years since Bert's death. It was as if I had shed an invisible weight I didn't even realize I was carrying, the weight of other people's expectations and manipulations. Dale noticed this change on one of her visits. "You look happy, Grandma," she said as we walked through the park. "More relaxed, more yourself." "I am," I agreed. It's amazing how much easier it is to breathe when no one is trying to control your life. "Mom's been asking about you," Dale said carefully. "She wants to know how you're doing." I sighed. "What did you tell her?" "The truth. That you're okay. That you found new friends and activities you like." I nodded. "That's good. I don't want her to think I'm suffering or regretting my decision." "She is suffering," Dale said quietly. "And not just because of the breakup with you. She and Dad are having serious problems." I stopped and looked at my granddaughter. "What kind of problems?" Dale told me that Orson's financial situation was even worse than they'd said. The project he had invested in, some luxury apartment complex in the suburbs of San Diego, had completely failed. The investors backed out. The bank demanded immediate repayment of the loan. They had to sell the second car and cancel vacations, Dale said. Dad even talked about selling the house and moving into an apartment. Mom is in a panic. She had never lived in cramped quarters. I felt a strange mixture of emotions: sympathy for Sybil, who faced the prospect of losing her familiar way of life, and a kind of grim satisfaction that Orson's plans had fallen through. "I'm sorry you're going through this," I said to Dale. "It must be hard to see your parents struggling with such problems." "The weird thing," Dale shook her head, "is that Dad still won't admit responsibility. He blames the investors, the bank, the real estate market, everyone but himself. E," she hesitated, "E, and you. He says that if you'd gone along with their plan, everything would have been fine. That you're a selfish old woman who chose your own comfort over the well-being of your family." I laughed, not with joy, but at the absurdity of the situation. Of course. Naturally, it was my duty to give up my house and my savings to cover his bad investments. How could I have been so selfish? Dale smiled weakly, too. "I know it's ridiculous, but he really thinks so. And Mom, she's somewhere in the middle. Sometimes she agrees with him. Sometimes she cries and says they're terrible people and deserve everything that happens to them." "She's not a horrible person," I said thoughtfully. "She's just weak, always has been, letting others make decisions for her and then suffering the consequences." "Do you think they'll ever realize what they did wrong?" Dale asked. I shrugged. Your mother, maybe. Orson. I doubt it. Some people would rather blame the whole world than admit their own mistakes. We continued our walk, and the conversation turned to more pleasant topics: Dale's studies, my new students, a book I'd recently read. But the information about Sybil and Orson's problems stayed with me. That evening, after Dale had fallen asleep in the guest room, I sat on the veranda, looking at the stars and pondering the vicissitudes of fate. If it hadn't been for their greed and manipulation, if they'd just honestly asked for help, maybe I could have found a way to support them in their time of need. Not by giving away the house, of course, but maybe by borrowing money or offering other solutions. But they had chosen the path of deceit and betrayal, and now they were reaping the fruits of their choice. I felt no schadenfreude, only sadness at the realization that my own daughter had chosen money and comfort over a relationship with her mother. The week after Dale's departure, I received an unexpected letter from Nomi Page, my attorney. She reported that one Orson Cromley had contacted her office to inquire about the possibility of challenging the trust I had set up to protect my home. Of course, I declined to discuss your case with an outsider, Nomi wrote, but I feel it necessary to alert you to his interest. I want to assure you that the documents we have prepared are in full compliance with the law and virtually impossible to challenge, especially by a person other than the beneficiary. So Orson still hadn't given up hope of getting my house. Even when faced with financial ruin, he continued to look for ways to use me to solve his problems instead of taking responsibility for himself. I showed the letter to Faye when she came in for tea. That man is incorrigible, she shook her head. But don't worry. Nomi is the best lawyer around. If she says your trust is protected, then it is. I'm not worried about the house, I said. What worries me is that he still hasn't given up on the idea. What could he do next? Try to declare me incompetent? Forge documents? He's not that stupid, Faye said confidently. It was one thing to manipulate an elderly relative, and quite another to commit a felony. I hoped she was right, but just in case, I decided to double-check all my documents and accounts to make sure they were secure. A month after the incident, Dale arrived with unexpected news. Mom and Dad are getting a divorce, she said as we sat down to dinner. I froze with my fork in my hand. What happened? Everything. Dale looked tired, but not upset. Financial problems, constant fighting, mutual accusations. And then Mom found documents showing that Dad was taking out loans in her name without telling her, using her credit history to get money for his projects. I shook my head. It sounded too familiar. How was she? Strangely, she seems to be feeling better. Dale stirred her soup thoughtfully. It was like she'd finally shed the heavy backpack she'd been lugging around for years. She'd found a job in the accounting department of a construction company, not the one she'd worked for before, but a rival firm. She rented a small apartment near my college, said she was making her own decisions for the first time in 20 years. I felt a sudden surge of pride in my daughter. Perhaps this crisis was an opportunity for her to find the strength she'd always had but rarely used. And Orson? Moved back in with his parents. He continues to blame everyone around him, especially you and Mom, for betraying him in his time of need. I sighed. Some people never change. A week after that conversation, I received another letter, this time from Sybil. It was short and devoid of the usual apologies and excuses. Mom, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness or even your attention after what I did, but I want you to know that I realize how horrible Orson and I did to you. Now that I've been the victim of such manipulation myself, I see everything in a new light. I'm not asking to repair the relationship. That would be presumptuous of me. I'm just saying I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. And I'm grateful that you're still in a relationship with Dale, despite my actions. She deserves to have you in her life. Respectfully, Sybil. I reread the letter several times, trying to catch falseness or manipulation, but I found nothing but genuine remorse. It wasn't the same verbose stream of apologies and explanations as before, just an honest admission of guilt and gratitude that I hadn't spread my anger to Dale. I didn't answer right away. I needed time to process my feelings. The anger and resentment were still there, though they had dulled over time. But now something else was added to them, perhaps the first germs of sympathy. 2 days later, over morning coffee on the veranda, I wrote a short reply. Sybil, thank you for your letter. I'm sorry you had to go through such trouble to understand the nature of manipulation. I hold no grudge against you, although the wound is still fresh. Maybe in time we can find a new way of communicating, one that is more honest and respectful on both sides. In the meantime, I'm glad you're finding your way. Take care of yourself, Mom. I didn't know if this correspondence would lead to a restored relationship. Perhaps it wouldn't. Too much had been said and done, but it was a small step towards some new understanding between us. Life went on as usual. My students were preparing for final exams. The garden club was planning a summer show. Faye had suggested a trip to the coast together in July. Dale was going to spend part of her summer vacation at my place, helping with the garden and possibly with my students. As I sat in the garden one evening watching the sunset, I thought about the strange turns life takes. A year ago, I was a lonely widow, moving to a new city in search of peace. Today, I was a teacher, a gardener, a friend, a neighbor, the center of a small but growing community. I lost a daughter, but gained a new depth of relationship with my granddaughter. Lost illusions about family harmony, but gained clarity and freedom from manipulation. Bert was fond of saying that life rarely goes according to a set plan, but often brings us where we need to be. Sitting in my garden, in my home, I felt the rightness of his words. I was exactly where I was supposed to be. And for the first time in a long time, I was truly free, not just from someone else's control, but from the fear that someone else might exert that control. I remembered Orson's face when he realized his plan had failed, the expression of shock and rage replaced by cold hostility. He was sure I was a weak, naive old woman to be manipulated, that I was so hungry for family approval that I'd let them take everything I had. He was wrong, and his mistake had cost him not only my house, but his own family, reputation, and financial stability. I felt no gloating about it, just relief that I'd exposed his plans before it was too late. After all, it wasn't about a house, money, or even independence. It was about respect. It was about recognizing that I was a human being with my own rights, desires, and decisions. That my life belongs to me, not to those who think they know best how I should live it. The sun had set over the horizon, coloring the Calexico sky in shades of orange and purple. I finished my tea and went inside. My home, my sanctuary, my fortress. Tomorrow will be a new day, full of small joys and discoveries. And I will meet it on my own terms, at my own pace, in my own house,